the world didn't see it coming. In a move that sent shockwaves through the Middle East, Israel launched what some are calling one of the most precise and devastating operations in modern intelligence history. The target? Not just a building or a convoy, but the very leadership of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Overnight, the headlines shifted from whispers of tension to outright declarations of war games. Israeli sources, though careful with their wording, hinted at a successful decapitation strike. But what does that really mean? This wasn't a random attack. It was surgical, deliberate, and chilling in its clarity. The kind of action that signals a dramatic escalation, not just between two rival nations, but between ideologies, proxies, and superpowers. Tehran was left reeling, and behind closed doors, world leaders scrambled to reassess the balance of power. But as the smoke cleared, one question echoed across diplomatic channels and defense ministries. Had Israel just lit a fuse that couldn't be extinguished? This wasn't just a lucky hit. It was the result of months, maybe years, of meticulous intelligence gathering. Sources suggest Israel's Mossad had been tracking key IRGC figures through encrypted communications, satellite surveillance, and even human assets deep within hostile territory. According to insiders, the operation was greenlit only after confirmation that multiple senior IRGC commanders would be in one secure location, a rare opportunity that couldn't be missed. What followed was a coordinated precision strike, no boots on the ground, no messy firefights, just a series of calculated blows delivered by unmanned drones and long-range missiles, all within minutes. Targets were neutralized before they even knew they were vulnerable. It wasn't just about eliminating individuals, it was about sending a message. Israel knows where you are, what you're planning, and how to stop you. And just like that, the top of Iran's military intelligence structure was gone, leaving a gaping void at the heart of one of the most powerful paramilitary organizations in the Middle East. But what happens when a power structure loses its head? The moment news of the strike hit Tehran, the atmosphere turned electric, charged with outrage, fear, and a thirst for vengeance. Iran's state media didn't hold back. Within hours, fiery speeches from IRGC commanders promised a severe and unforgettable response. Images of the destroyed site were broadcast nationwide, accompanied by defiant anthems and chants calling for retribution. The regime framed the attack not just as a military assault, but as a national insult, an affront that demanded blood. Behind the scenes, however, the mood was different. Intelligence leaks suggested chaos. The chain of command within the IRGC had been severely disrupted. Key decisions were delayed, field operatives left in the dark. The psychological impact was immediate. Paranoia set in, with whispers of double agents and betrayal from within. And while Tehran threatened retaliation, there was no clear plan. No figure had stepped forward to rally the ranks. It wasn't just a strike on leadership. It was a strike on morale. Still, if there's one thing history has taught us, it's that the IRGC never stays down for long, and the world watched, wondering, would the next move come in the form of missiles, cyber attacks, or something far more unpredictable? This wasn't just an Iran-Israel incident, it was a geopolitical earthquake. Almost immediately, neighboring countries began to brace for fallout. In Lebanon, Hezbollah, widely seen as Iran's strongest proxy, put its forces on high alert. In Syria, where Iranian militias operate freely, Israeli jets were reportedly seen flying low, patrolling the skies like hawks circling potential prey. The strike had pulled the pin on a much larger grenade. Arab Gulf nations, many of whom maintain quiet but growing ties with Israel, found themselves walking a tightrope. Publicly, they condemned violence. Privately, some offered silent nods of approval, seeing Iran's weakened state as an opportunity. Meanwhile, the United States urged restraint. But behind closed doors, military assets were repositioned, embassies fortified, and contingency plans updated. Even Russia and China watched closely, aware that a broader conflict could destabilize their interests in the region. And for ordinary civilians across the Middle East, the question wasn't if this would escalate, but when and how far it would go. But beneath the diplomatic language and measured statements, everyone knew. The rules of engagement had just changed. Military experts around the globe quickly weighed in, and their consensus was chilling. This was not an isolated strike. It was the opening move in a new phase of covert warfare. Retired generals, intelligence veterans, and Middle East analysts all pointed to the same unsettling pattern. Israel had raised the stakes, but Iran wouldn't respond with a traditional military strike. That's not how the IRGC plays. Instead, the expectation is asymmetric retaliation. Think cyber warfare, sabotage, or unleashing proxies in regions far beyond the Middle East. Tel Aviv, London, New York. No city is entirely out of reach, and Israel knows it. That's why its Iron Dome defense system is on high alert. Mossad is already bolstering overseas surveillance. Embassies are locking down. This is chess, not checkers, and the next move might be weeks away, hidden, delayed, but devastating. One chilling prediction stood out. If Iran strikes back using a non-state actor like Hezbollah, or a sleeper cell in Europe or South America, it could trigger a chain reaction that brings in NATO, drags in Gulf powers, and ignites the very thing everyone claims to want to avoid, an all-out regional war. But just as tensions reached boiling point, something unexpected happened. While the headlines focused on missiles and speeches, something far more subtle and arguably more dangerous was happening in the background. In the days following the strike, intelligence chatter revealed a quiet scramble inside Iran's leadership. Not just military chaos, but political instability. Behind closed doors, factions within the regime began to clash. Some demanded immediate retaliation, others urged caution, fearing the country was walking into a trap set by Israel. But the real surprise? Sources claim Iran's supreme leader was blindsided. The operation had exposed deep cracks within the IRGC's command and its ties to the political elite. For the first time in years, whispers of power struggles began to leak from the normally airtight walls of Tehran's inner circle. This wasn't just a military humiliation, it was a credibility crisis. And outside Iran, other powers noticed. Regional players who once feared the IRGC began to reposition. Suddenly, alliances were shifting. Backdoor negotiations opened. Some countries saw this as a rare chance to strike diplomatic deals with a weakened Iran, or double down on defense pacts with Israel. In a matter of days, the battlefield wasn't just on the ground or in the sky. It had moved into strategy rooms, intelligence networks, and diplomatic corridors across the globe. But as the pressure mounted, the question wasn't just what will Iran do next? It became, who's really in control now? Just days after the physical strike, a new front quietly emerged. One with no explosions, no missiles, but just as deadly. Iran's cyber warfare units, some of the most sophisticated outside of global superpowers, reportedly sprang into action. Several Israeli government websites experienced temporary outages. Anonymous sources hinted at attempted intrusions into financial systems, energy grids, and even air traffic control servers. Israel responded just as swiftly, launching its own silent countermeasures. Cybersecurity analysts noticed a spike in unusual activity targeting Iranian nuclear facilities, satellite communications, and even internal propaganda networks. This wasn't just retaliation, it was disruption. Psychological warfare delivered through screens and servers. Both nations have a long history of using cyber attacks as weapons. From Stuxnet to shadowy disinformation campaigns, this digital arms race has become a key pillar of modern conflict, and it's no longer confined to firewalls and keyboards. Everyday civilians could be caught in the crossfire, with power outages, hacked devices, and data leaks looming as very real threats. And yet, the silence around these attacks is deafening. No parades, no public warnings, just quiet chaos beneath the surface. It's a war no one officially admits to, but everyone's already fighting. And while the digital front burns quietly, the real question is, how long until these invisible battles spill over into real-world consequences? As governments played chess behind closed doors, the public was gripped by a very different game: information warfare. Social media exploded with conflicting narratives. Iranian state outlets called the attack an act of terrorism. Israeli news framed it as a necessary preemptive strike. Meanwhile, global headlines battled to define the story. Was this strategic genius or reckless provocation? In the streets of Tehran, angry crowds gathered outside foreign embassies, chanting for revenge. Israeli citizens, on the other hand, rushed to bomb shelters during drills, bracing for what might come next. In both nations, fear mingled with pride, each side convinced they were standing on the right side of history. But it wasn't just local. Across Europe, the US, and the Arab world, public opinion was deeply divided. Some hailed Israel's strike as bold and justified. Others warned that this could spiral into another endless conflict, costing innocent lives in a region already exhausted by war. The media only fueled the uncertainty. Some networks ran images of charred buildings and sobbing families. Others zeroed in on military diagrams and anonymous leaks. Misinformation spread like wildfire, and in the confusion, one thing became clear. The truth wasn't just under fire, it was being weaponized. And while the world argued over who was right, somewhere in the shadows, the next phase of the conflict was already being prepared. As days turned into weeks, the headlines began to fade, but those closest to the conflict knew better. The silence wasn't peace. It was pressure building. Intelligence agencies across the world reported unusual activity. IRGC operatives changing locations, encrypted chatter increasing, weapons being moved across borders, and then nothing. No missile strikes, no televised retaliation, just a tense, uneasy quiet. Israeli officials called it a victory of deterrence, but military analysts weren't so sure. They warned that Iran was simply waiting, calculating, and choosing not if to respond, but how and when to cause maximum damage. Behind the scenes, defense systems stayed on red alert. Embassies received new threat advisories. Commercial flights subtly altered routes. The world might have moved on, but the region hadn't. This wasn't over. In fact, some believed the real response would come not in the form of warplanes or explosions, but as a strategic blow no one would see coming. A political assassination, an attack on a foreign ally, a cyber blackout that cripples a financial system. Something was brewing. Everyone could feel it. And in this fragile pause, one question lingered like a storm cloud no one wanted to name out loud. Was the worst still ahead? This wasn't just another military operation. It was a turning point, a signal that warfare in the modern world doesn't need to be declared with words, only with precision strikes, shadow networks, and digital silence. Israel may have decapitated the IRGC's leadership, but in doing so, it may have unleashed a storm that doesn't follow the rules of conventional warfare. Iran, wounded and humiliated, is now operating in the realm it knows best, the unpredictable, the hidden, the long game. And the world is watching a new kind of battle unfold, one where nations fight without ever meeting on a battlefield, where fear spreads faster than missiles, and where truth itself becomes a weapon. Whether you see this as a victory, a provocation, or a necessary evil, one thing is undeniable. The balance of power in the Middle East has shifted, quietly, sharply, permanently, and as the dust settles, for now, one thought hangs heavy in the air. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the prologue.